Imagine pulling a penny from your pocket and realizing it might be worth far more than 1 cent. A coin that looks completely ordinary, something millions of people spent without a second thought, could actually be hiding a surprising story and real collector value. Today, we are uncovering one of America's most fascinating everyday coins, the 1964 no-mint mark Lincoln penny. This coin is a small piece of American history that many people still own, often tucked away in old jars, drawers, or inherited collections. It's part of the famous Lincoln cent series, and at first glance, it looks just like countless other pennies. But behind its simple design is a story of a changing nation, a shifting economy, and a moment in time when American coins were about to change forever. The 1964 Lincoln penny was produced during one of the most important periods in modern U.S. coin history. At the time, the country was dealing with rising metal prices, public concern over coin shortages, and growing uncertainty about how long traditional coin materials could remain affordable. The U.S. Mint was producing massive numbers of coins, especially pennies, to keep up with everyday demand. In 1964 alone, hundreds of millions of Lincoln cents were struck. When a penny has no mint mark, it means it was made at the Philadelphia Mint. During that era, Philadelphia pennies did not carry a mint mark, unlike coins made in Denver or San Francisco. So when collectors say 1964 no mint mark penny, they are referring specifically to the Philadelphia issue of that year. This was a time when copper was becoming more expensive, and within just a few years, the mint would stop making pennies mostly from copper altogether. That makes the 1964 penny part of the final chapter of what collectors now call the classic copper cent era. These coins weren't made to be rare, they were made to circulate heavily. But history has a way of turning everyday objects into collectibles, especially when certain versions survive in unusually good condition or contain rare errors. The design of the 1964 penny features Abraham Lincoln on the front, just like every Lincoln cent since 1909. His portrait faces right, and above his head are the words, "In God We Trust." Along the left side is the word "Liberty," and to the right is the date, 1964. This design was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner and remains one of the most recognizable coin designs in American history. On the back, you'll find the Lincoln Memorial, which had replaced the wheat ears design just 5 years earlier in 1959. Inside the memorial, if you look closely, you can actually see a tiny seated statue of Lincoln, making this one of the few U.S. coins that shows the same person on both sides. Around the top are the words United States of America, and below that, 1 cent. The metal composition of the 1964 penny is especially important to collectors. It's made of about 95% copper, with the remaining 5% made up of zinc and tin. This gives the coin its classic reddish-brown color when new. Over time, most of these pennies darkened into deeper brown tones, but some were preserved in bright red condition, especially those stored away immediately after minting. Those red pennies, untouched by circulation, are some of the most valuable examples today. Even though millions were made, only a tiny fraction remain in near-perfect condition. That's where value begins to separate ordinary coins from collectible ones. Now let's talk about what really excites collectors, errors, and unusual variations. Most 1964 pennies are completely normal, but a small number was struck with mistakes that make them highly desirable. Some examples include doubled dies, where parts of the lettering or date appear doubled due to a misalignment during the minting process. Others may show off-center strikes, clipped planchets, or die cracks that create raised lines across the surface of the coin. There have even been rumors over the years about rare transitional metal errors involving 1964 cents, since the mint was experimenting with different compositions around that time. While confirmed examples are extremely rare and controversial, even standard error varieties from 1964 can sell for far more than face value, especially if the error is dramatic and clearly visible. So why would a coin that was made in huge numbers be considered valuable at all? The answer lies in condition, rarity within rarity, and demand. While millions of 1964 pennies still exist, very few survive in top mint state condition with strong original color, sharp details, and no signs of wear. Collectors compete for the best examples, and prices rise accordingly. A circulated 1964 penny that's worn and darkened is usually worth just a few cents above face value, mostly for its copper content. But a well-preserved, uncirculated coin can be worth several dollars, sometimes more depending on color quality. And high-grade certified examples can bring much higher prices. For example, top-condition 1964 no-mint mark pennies graded by professional services have sold at auction for hundreds of dollars. Some pristine red examples graded at the highest levels have reached prices over $1,000. Error coins, depending on the type and severity of the mistake, can range anywhere from $50 to several $1,000s. Collectors especially prize coins with strong eye appeal, bright color, smooth surfaces, and clean strikes. When supply is low and demand is high, even a coin that once cost 1 cent can suddenly become a serious collectible. If you're wondering whether you might own one of these valuable pennies, it's important to know how to identify a real 1964 no-mint mark Lincoln cent and avoid counterfeits or altered coins. First, check the date carefully. The 1 and 9 in 1964 should have sharp edges, and the numbers should match the style used on other pennies from the early 1960s. Next, look below the date. If there's no letter under the year, that means it was minted in Philadelphia, which is exactly what collectors expect for a no-mint mark penny from that era. If you see a D or S, then it's a Denver or San Francisco issue, not the one we're discussing today. Weight is another important clue. A genuine 1964 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. If it weighs significantly more or less, it may be altered or counterfeit. The color should also look natural, not painted or artificially brightened. Some people try to clean coins to make them look better, but cleaning actually damages a coin's surface and lowers its value dramatically. For error coins, it's especially important to be cautious. Many altered coins are mistaken for real mint errors. A professional coin dealer or grading service can help verify authenticity and determine whether a coin is genuinely rare or simply damaged after leaving the mint. One surprising fact about the 1964 penny is that it was struck during the peak of America's coin shortage scare. People were hoarding coins, believing their metal value might soon exceed face value. This fear was one of the reasons Congress later approved changes to coin compositions. Within just a few years, the familiar copper penny would be replaced by cheaper metals. Another fascinating detail is how common this penny still is today compared to how collectible it has become. Millions of people alive right now have handled a 1964 penny at some point in their lives, often without realizing it. Yet collectors now search through rolls and old jars hoping to find that one perfect example hiding among ordinary coins. Some collectors specialize in memorial cents from 1959 to 2008, and the 1964 penny is one of the most important dates in that series. It represents both the height of copper production and the calm before major changes in American coinage. That historical context adds emotional value, not just monetary value. Collectors also love this coin because it's approachable. Unlike rare gold coins or early colonial pieces that cost thousands or millions of dollars, the 1964 Lincoln penny is something most people can realistically find and afford. That makes it exciting for beginners and experienced collectors alike. It's a reminder that valuable coins don't always look valuable, sometimes they're hiding in plain sight. Another reason this penny remains popular is its connection to Abraham Lincoln himself. The Lincoln cent is the longest-running portrait design in U.S. coin history, and millions of Americans feel a personal connection to it. Holding a 1964 penny is like holding a small piece of American culture from the mid-20th century, a time of space exploration, civil rights movements, and dramatic social change. Some collectors enjoy building complete year sets, and the 1964 penny often marks a turning point in those collections. Others hunt for high-grade examples to upgrade their sets. And era collectors constantly examine 1964 cents under magnification, hoping to discover an overlooked variety that could be worth far more than expected. There's also something deeply satisfying about the idea that a coin nearly everyone has ignored might still carry hidden value. It turns ordinary pocket change into a treasure hunt, where patience and curiosity can sometimes be rewarded in surprising ways. So the next time you come across an old jar of pennies or receive change at a store, take a moment to look closely. That simple brown coin with Abraham Lincoln's face and the date 1964 might not be just spare change. It might be a survivor from the last great copper era, a coin that witnessed a turning point in American money and possibly even a small collectible worth far more than 1 cent. The 1964 no-mint mark Lincoln penny teaches us that history doesn't always sit in museums or vaults. Sometimes it's sitting quietly in your pocket, waiting to be noticed. And that's what makes coin collecting so powerful. It turns everyday objects into stories and stories into discoveries. So keep your eyes open, check your change, and never assume a penny isn't worth your time. Because the next time you hear that familiar clink of coins in your hand, one of them just might be hiding a story and a value far greater than you ever imagined. Imagine this for a moment. You reach into a jar of loose change, grab a penny that looks completely ordinary, and discover it could be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. No treasure map, no metal detector. Just one small coin hiding in plain sight. Today, that coin is the 1968 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, and its story is far more surprising than most people realize. At first glance, the 1968 Lincoln penny looks just like any other penny you've seen your whole life. Abraham Lincoln's profile faces right on the front. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial stands tall and symmetrical. There's no flashy design, no gold color, no special marking that screams rare. But what makes this penny special is what you don't see, no mint mark under the date, and what may be hiding within the coin itself. This coin was made in 1968, a year that quietly marked the beginning of a new chapter in US coin production. For most people, it's just another copper penny. But for collectors, it's a fascinating piece of American history, filled with minting changes, rare eras, and surprising values that can turn pocket change into something extraordinary. To understand why the 1968 no-mint mark penny matters, we have to travel back to the late 1960s. America was in the middle of major cultural change. The Vietnam War was ongoing, civil rights movements were reshaping society, and inflation was affecting the economy. One unexpected result of rising metal prices was that people began hoarding coins, especially pennies, because the copper inside them was becoming more valuable. This caused a serious coin shortage across the country. Vending machines didn't have enough coins, businesses struggled to make change, and the US Mint had to respond quickly. In 1965, they removed mint marks from all coins for several years to discourage collectors from hoarding specific mint issues. Instead of D for Denver or S for San Francisco, coins were left blank, no mint mark at all, even though they were being made at multiple facilities. By 1968, mint marks returned to most coins, but not all. Coins struck in Philadelphia still carried no mint mark. That means a 1968 penny without a mint mark was made in Philadelphia, while pennies with a D were made in Denver, and those with an S came from San Francisco. So the 1968 no mint mark Lincoln penny represents a key moment, the return of mint marks after years of absence, and the continued dominance of Philadelphia as the nation's primary coin producer. In total, over 1.7 billion pennies were made in Philadelphia in 1968 alone. That's more than enough to circle the earth many times over. With numbers like that, it's easy to assume this coin has no real value. And in most cases, that's true, but only at first glance. Let's talk about the coin itself. The 1968 Lincoln penny is made primarily of copper, about 95% copper, with the rest zinc and tin. It weighs 3.11 grams and measures just under 20 millimeters in diameter. The front, called the obverse, features Victor David Brenner's famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln, which has appeared on U.S. pennies since 1909. Above Lincoln's head is the word Liberty, to the right is the date, and across the top reads, "In God we trust." On the reverse side is the Lincoln Memorial, introduced in 1959 to honor the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln sitting inside the memorial, making this one of the only U.S. coins where the same person appears on both sides. Most 1968 pennies look identical, but some are anything but ordinary. This is where things get interesting. During this era, the mint was using new, high-speed coin presses to meet massive demand. While these machines increased production, they also created more opportunities for errors. And errors are where serious collector value begins. One of the most sought-after varieties of the 1968 no-mint mark penny is the double die obverse. This happens when the die used to strike the coin is misaligned during the hubbing process, causing parts of the design to appear doubled. On these coins, you may see doubling in the words, "In God we trust," "Liberty," or even the date itself. Unlike minor machine doubling, which adds little value, true double die errors are dramatic and clearly visible under magnification, and they can be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars depending on condition. Another valuable variety is the off-center strike. This happens when the blank coin planchet isn't seated properly during striking, causing part of the design to be missing. Some off-center pennies still show the full date and are especially prized by collectors. Then there are clipped planchets, where part of the metal blank is missing before the coin is struck, creating a curved bite-shaped cut from the edge. There are also broad strikes, where the collar fails to hold the coin in place, resulting in a wider-than-normal coin with distorted edges. But perhaps the most exciting error is the transitional metal strike. Although rare, some collectors search for 1968 pennies struck on wrong metal planchets intended for other coins. These are extremely rare and can command thousands of dollars if authenticated. Now let's talk about value, because this is where curiosity turns into excitement. In everyday condition, a normal 1968 no-mint mark penny is usually worth between 2 and 5 cents, mostly for its copper content or as a filler in coin collections. In uncirculated condition, meaning it shows no wear and still has its original mint shine, values can rise to around 25 cents to $1. But pristine examples graded by professional services like PCGS or NGC can sell for significantly more. For example, a 1968 no-mint mark penny graded MS67 red has sold at auction for over $300. Higher-grade specimens with deep red color and sharp strikes are extremely rare because most pennies entered circulation immediately and were heavily handled. Now let's move into error territory. Authentic double-die 1968 no-mint mark pennies have sold in the range of $500 to over $3,000, depending on the strength of the doubling and the condition of the coin. One strong example in top condition crossed the $5,000 mark in a private sale. Off-center strikes with full dates often sell between $100 and $400. Clipped planchet errors typically sell from $50 to $250, depending on size and eye appeal. Broad strikes range from $40 to $200. And wrong planchet strikes, though incredibly rare, can exceed $2,000. So while billions of these pennies were made, only a tiny fraction carry these valuable characteristics, and that's why people continue checking their change decades later. But how do you tell if your 1968 penny is real and not fake, altered, or damaged? First, start with the basics. The coin should weigh about 3.11 grams. A significantly lighter or heavier coin could indicate damage, corrosion, or tampering. The diameter should be standard, and the edge should be smooth with no signs of filing or reshaping. Look closely at the date and lettering using a magnifying glass or smartphone zoom. True double die coins show clear separation lines, almost like shadows, in the lettering and numbers, not just blurry edges. Machine doubling looks flat and shelf-like, while real doubling has depth. Check the color. Natural copper ages into warm brown or red-brown tones. Extremely bright or unnatural colors may indicate cleaning or chemical treatment, which lowers value. If you suspect an error or high-grade coin, never clean it. Cleaning removes original surface metal and can cut the value dramatically. Instead, store it safely and consider professional grading if it looks promising. Now let's explore some fun facts about the 1968 penny that most people don't know. First, 1968 was the first year mint marks officially returned after being removed since 1965. That makes this coin part of a historic transition period in U.S. coinage. Second, the Lincoln Memorial reverse design would remain on pennies for exactly 50 years, ending in 2008. That means the 1968 penny is part of the heart of that iconic era. Third, because of rising copper prices, pennies made just a few years later would change composition. By 1982, the U.S. Mint switched to zinc-based pennies with copper plating. That makes the 1968 penny one of the last generations of true copper Lincoln cents. Fourth, some collectors build entire sets of Lincoln pennies by year, mint mark, and era type, and the 1968 no mint mark coin plays a crucial role in those collections because of its transitional status and known era varieties. And here's something fascinating. Many valuable 1968 pennies weren't discovered in rolls or collections. They were found in everyday pocket change decades later. People checking jars, old piggy banks, or inherited coin boxes stumbled upon coins that quietly grew in value while sitting forgotten. So why do collectors love this coin today? First, it's affordable to start collecting. You can still find 1968 pennies in circulation or in old rolls, which makes the hunt exciting and accessible. Not many collectible items offer the chance to find something valuable in your couch cushions. Second, it's historically meaningful. This coin sits at the crossroads of minting reform, metal price changes, and America's evolving economy. Third, the error potential is real. Unlike many modern coins, where errors are rare and tightly controlled, the late 1960s produced enough varieties to keep collectors searching. Fourth, the design itself is iconic. Lincoln's portrait and the memorial reverse represent one of the longest-running coin designs in American history. Holding one connects you to generations of Americans who used the same coin for groceries, newspapers, and daily life. And finally, there's the thrill. The possibility that a 1-cent coin could be worth hundreds or thousands keeps people searching, and sometimes that curiosity pays off. Let's bring this story together. The 1968 no mint mark Lincoln penny isn't just copper and zinc. It's a piece of American history struck during a time of economic stress, minting innovation, and cultural change. Most are worth just a few cents, but some carry hidden errors that transform them into collector treasures. It's a reminder that value isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, small, and hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to look closer. So the next time you come across an old penny, don't dismiss it too quickly. Turn it over, check the date, look for doubling, examine the edges. Because one of the most surprising discoveries you can make might be sitting in the smallest place, your spare change. And who knows, the next 1968 no mint mark penny you hold might not just be worth a cent, it might be worth a story and possibly a small fortune. Keep searching, keep wondering. And remember, sometimes history hides in the smallest details. Imagine pulling a penny from your pocket that looks ordinary but could be worth hundreds, even thousands of dollars. Most people would spend it without a second thought. But in 1972, something unusual happened at the U.S. Mint, and a tiny mistake created one of the most famous Lincoln pennies ever. Today, we're diving into the story of the 1972 no mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that proves even everyday change can hold extraordinary secrets. The 1972 no-mint mark Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin made in Philadelphia, where coins traditionally did not carry mint marks during that time. At first glance, it looks just like any other copper penny, with Abraham Lincoln's face on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. Millions of Americans carried these coins in their pockets, dropped them into jars, or used them to buy gum or newspapers. But hidden among these everyday pennies were rare varieties that would later become legends in the coin-collecting world. To understand why this penny matters, we need to travel back to the early 1970s. The United States was going through major changes. The Vietnam War was winding down, the economy was facing inflation, and the country was transitioning away from silver coins. Pennies were still made mostly of copper, but rising metal prices were already causing concern at the U.S. Mint. In 1972, the Philadelphia Mint produced over 2 billion Lincoln cents, making it one of the highest mintage years in U.S. history. These pennies were meant to keep up with everyday demand for small change, especially as vending machines, parking meters, and retail transactions relied heavily on coins. The design of the 1972 penny continued the Lincoln Memorial reverse that had been introduced in 1959 to honor the 150th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. The front of the coin shows Lincoln's profile, designed by sculptor Victor David Brenner. His initials, VDB, are tucked quietly on the shoulder of Lincoln's coat. The back features the Lincoln Memorial, and if you look closely between the columns, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside, a small detail that many people miss even today. The metal composition of the 1972 penny is another important part of its story. These coins were made of 95% copper and 5% zinc, the classic bronze formula used for most Lincoln cents before 1982. This gives the coin its rich reddish-brown color when new, which slowly darkens over time as the copper reacts with air. Many collectors love these older copper pennies because they feel heavier, sound different when dropped, and carry a sense of history compared to modern zinc cents. So far, nothing sounds especially rare. After all, more than 2 billion of these coins were struck. But what truly sets the 1972 no-mint mark penny apart is one of the most famous and dramatic minting eras in American coin history: the 1972 doubled die obverse. A doubled die occurs when the die used to strike coins receives a misaligned impression during its creation, causing parts of the design to appear doubled on the finished coin. In 1972, one such die produced pennies with extremely strong doubling, especially on the words "Liberty," "In God We Trust," and the date itself. Unlike minor doubling that can be hard to see, this doubling is bold, clear, and visible to the naked eye. Letters appear almost stacked on top of each other, creating a ghost-like second image. What makes this even more fascinating is how many of these era coins slipped into circulation. Experts estimate that roughly 20,000 examples of the 1972 doubled die obverse were released before the mint noticed the problem. That might sound like a lot, but compared to the more than 2 billion pennies struck that year, it's an incredibly tiny fraction. Most people who found them early on had no idea they were special and spent them like normal change. As collectors became aware of this variety, the 1972 doubled die penny quickly gained fame. Today, it is considered one of the most important modern US-era coins, right alongside the legendary 1955 doubled die penny. The boldness of the doubling and the large number of examples found in circulation make it both exciting to search for and realistic for collectors to own, which adds to its popularity. Now let's talk about value, because this is where the story becomes even more exciting. A regular 1972 no-mint mark penny in worn condition is usually worth just 1 cent, or maybe a few cents if it has nice color or detail. Even uncirculated examples without errors are often worth only $1 or $2, but the doubled die variety is in a completely different league. Well-worn examples of the 1972 doubled die penny often sell for several $100s. In average circulated condition, values commonly range from $200 to $400. In higher grades, especially coins that still show sharp detail and strong red color, prices can rise dramatically. Uncirculated examples regularly sell for $1,000 to $3,000, and the finest known specimens have sold for well over $10,000 at major coin auctions. One famous auction example involved a brilliant red 1972 double-die penny graded by a professional service as M-67 red. It sold for more than $14,000, stunning many collectors who never imagined a penny from the 1970s could reach that level. Even today, whenever one of these high-grade examples appears at auction, it attracts serious attention from collectors and investors alike. But the double die is not the only interesting variety for this year. Some 1972 pennies also show off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and other mint errors, though these are less famous and usually bring lower prices. Still, they add to the sense that 1972 was a year full of surprises at the mint. So how can you tell if you might have a valuable 1972 penny? First, check the date. It should read 1972, and there should be no mint mark below the date. Pennies made in Denver during this year have a small d, but the famous double die only exists on Philadelphia coins without a mint mark. Next, look closely at the words Liberty and In God We Trust. On the double die variety, these letters will appear thick and doubled, almost as if someone printed them twice, slightly offset from each other. The doubling is strongest on Liberty and the date, especially the 2 in 1972. It's important to know the difference between true double die and machine doubling, which is much more common and far less valuable. Machine doubling usually looks flat and shelf-like, with no rounded edges, and it often appears inconsistent across the design. A true double die, like the 1972 variety, shows full, rounded doubling that looks like two impressions rather than a smear or shadow. If you think you've found one, it's best to compare it to known images from reputable coin references or have it examined by a professional grading service. When it comes to spotting fakes, most counterfeits involve altering normal 1972 pennies to look like the double die variety. Some people try to etch or reshape letters to mimic doubling. Others may glue metal or use tools to create fake outlines. The easiest way to protect yourself is to study genuine examples closely. Real double die pennies show consistent doubling across multiple areas, not just one letter or number. The surfaces should look natural, not scratched or uneven. And when in doubt, professional authentication is always worth the cost for a potentially valuable coin. One fun and surprising detail about the 1972 penny is how many people discovered them by accident. There are stories of collectors finding them in pocket change, in rolls from banks, and even in old jars that had been sitting untouched for decades. Unlike ancient coins or rare gold pieces locked away in vaults, this is a coin that once jingled in everyday pockets across America. The idea that a life-changing coin could still be hiding in a drawer or coffee is part of what makes this penny so exciting. Another interesting fact is that the 1972 double die penny helped spark a new generation of coin hunters. In the 1970s and 1980s, as news spread about valuable modern eras, people began checking their change more carefully. Coin collecting became more accessible, no longer limited to rare silver or gold coins from the 1800s. Suddenly, even modern pennies could be treasure, and that sense of possibility energized hobbyists nationwide. Collectors today love the 1972 no mint mark penny not just because of its value, but because of its story. It represents the human side of coin production, where small mistakes can lead to big discoveries. It reminds us that even in an age of massive industrial minting, errors still happen, and those errors can become treasured artifacts. For many collectors, owning a 1972 double die penny is like owning a piece of modern American history, a moment frozen in copper. There's also something deeply satisfying about the hunt. searching through rolls of pennies or inherited collections in hopes of spotting that bold doubling connects collectors to the thrill of discovery. It's not just about money, it's about curiosity, patience, and the joy of finding something special where others saw only spare change. Even if you never find the double die variety, the regular 1972 penny still has charm. It's part of the final era of true copper cents, struck before rising metal prices forced the mint to change compositions in the early 1980s. These coins feel solid, sound different, and carry a warmth that many collectors prefer over modern zinc pennies. Holding one is like holding a small piece of American life from more than half a century ago. So the next time you come across a handful of old pennies, take a closer look. Check the dates, look at the letters, pay attention to the details, because hidden among ordinary coins, there may still be a few extraordinary ones waiting to be discovered. The 1972 no-mint mark Lincoln penny teaches us a powerful lesson. Sometimes the most valuable things in life don't look special at first. They hide in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to notice. And who knows, the next time you reach into your pocket or open an old jar of coins, you might just be holding a small copper disc with a big story and an even bigger surprise. Because in the world of coin collecting, history doesn't always sit behind glass in museums. Sometimes it's right there in your hand, quietly waiting to be seen.
What if I told you that one ordinary-looking penny from 1976 could be hiding in your pocket, your couch cushions, or an old jar in the garage, and some versions of it have surprised collectors with prices far beyond 1 cent? Today we're uncovering the real story behind the 1976 D. Lincoln penny, a coin most people overlook, but one that has quietly earned a place in American numismatic history. This coin is the 1976 Lincoln Memorial penny with a D mint mark, meaning it was made at the Denver Mint. At first glance, it looks just like millions of other pennies from the 1970s. Abraham Lincoln's familiar face is on the front, and the Lincoln Memorial sits on the back. But beneath that simple design is a coin tied to one of the most patriotic years in American history, the nation's bicentennial, and a series of subtle details that make collectors take a second look. To understand why this penny matters, we need to go back to 1976. The United States was celebrating 200 years since the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Across the country, people were marking the occasion with parades, special events, and commemorative items of every kind. The U.S. Mint even redesigned the quarter, half-dollar, and dollar coins with special bicentennial reverses. But interestingly, the penny was left unchanged. Instead of creating a special design, the Mint continued producing the Lincoln Memorial cent, including millions struck at the Denver Mint with the D mint mark. That decision might seem boring at first, but it actually makes the 1976 D penny a fascinating time capsule. While other coins loudly celebrated America's 200th birthday, the penny quietly continued its role as the everyday coin of the people, passed hand to hand in grocery stores, gas stations, and lunch lines across the nation. It became part of daily life during a year filled with reflection, pride, and national memory. The 1976 D. Lincoln penny is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc, just like most pennies from 1909 through 1982. That means it weighs about 3.11 grams and has a solid warm copper tone when well preserved. On the front, you'll see Victor David Brenner's classic portrait of Abraham Lincoln, first introduced in 1909 to mark the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. Above Lincoln's head is the word Liberty, with the date 1976 on the right side. Just below that date is the small but important D mint mark, showing it was struck in Denver. On the reverse, you'll see the Lincoln Memorial, introduced in 1959 to honor the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. If you look closely at the center of the memorial, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside, making him one of the few people ever shown twice on the same U.S. coin. Coin, both front and back. Now here's where things get interesting. While hundreds of millions of 1976 D pennies were made, meaning most are still only worth face value, some examples stand out due to condition, striking quality, or rare errors. And those special coins are what collectors search for, sometimes paying surprisingly strong prices when the right piece appears. One of the most important factors in value is condition. Most 1976 D pennies circulated heavily and show wear, scratches, and dull coloring. But coins that were saved straight from rolls or mint sets and never entered circulation can look almost brand new. These are called uncirculated coins, and when they retain their original red copper color, collectors describe them as red examples. In top condition, these coins can sell for many times face value. Some 1976 D pennies have errors, small mistakes made during the minting process, and these are where the real excitement begins. One type collectors watch for is the double die error. This happens when a coin's design is stamped slightly twice, creating a doubling effect on letters or numbers. On Lincoln cents, doubling often appears in words like liberty, in God we trust, or on the date itself. A genuine double die can turn an ordinary penny into a collectible worth tens, hundreds, or even more, depending on strength and rarity. Another type of error is off-center strikes, where the design is misaligned and part of the coin's blank surface shows along one side. There are also broad strikes, clipped planchets, and die cracks, all signs of something unusual happening during production. Most pennies don't have these features, but the few that do are carefully studied and often submitted to professional grading services for authentication and valuation. So, how valuable can a 1976 D penny really be? In everyday circulated condition, it's typically worth just 1 cent, maybe 2 or 3 cents if sold in bulk for copper value. But uncirculated examples can sell for a few dollars, especially if they're well struck with sharp details and bright red color. High-grade certified examples have sold for much more. In professional coin auctions, 1976 D pennies graded at the very top levels, especially those rated MS67 red or higher, have sold for over $100, and in rare cases, several $100s. These prices aren't about rarity of the date itself, but about how difficult it is to find coins preserved in absolutely pristine condition after nearly half a century. A strong double die 1976 D penny, properly authenticated, has sold for hundreds of dollars, depending on eye appeal and clarity of the doubling. Dramatic off-center strikes or rare planchet errors can also bring similar amounts. While these are not common, they do exist, and that's what keeps collectors checking their change. Now let's talk about how to identify a real 1976 D penny and avoid fakes or altered coins. First, check the date and mint mark. The 1976 should look natural, evenly spaced, and properly aligned. The D mint mark should be small and clean, located just below the date. If the mint mark looks unusually large, misshapen, or appears glued or scratched into place, it may be altered. Next, weigh the coin if you can. A genuine copper 1976 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. If it's significantly lighter or heavier, that could indicate damage, wear, or even a novelty piece. Natural copper tones range from bright red to reddish brown to dark brown, depending on age and storage. If a coin looks unnaturally shiny or coated, it may have been cleaned or altered, which reduces its value. If you believe you found an error coin, the best step is to compare it to verified examples online or submit it to a professional grading service. These companies authenticate coins, assign condition grades, and seal them in protective holders, which helps establish trust and market value. Now here's something many people don't realize. Even though the U.S. Mint produced billions of pennies in the 1970s, very few were saved in perfect condition. Back then, people didn't think of modern cents as collectibles. They were everyday money, tossed into drawers, jars, and pockets. That means truly flawless examples today are much scarcer than the original mintage numbers suggest. Another surprising fact is that the copper content alone has made these older pennies appealing to some collectors and investors. While it's illegal to melt U.S. cents for metal value, many people still hold on to pre-1982 copper pennies because of their intrinsic material appeal and historical character. The 1976 D penny sits right at the heart of that copper era, making it part of a disappearing chapter in U.S. coinage. There's also the emotional side of this coin. For many Americans, 1976 represents pride, celebration, and nostalgia. It was a year of fireworks, flags, and reflections on national identity. Holding a penny from that year connects people to that moment in time, even if the coin itself doesn't shout bicentennial the way quarters and half dollars do. In a way, the 1976 D penny feels like the quiet witness to a loud and historic year. Collectors also appreciate the design simplicity of the Lincoln Memorial cent. Unlike more modern designs, it has a classic balanced look that feels distinctly mid-20th century. For beginners, the 1976 D penny is affordable, easy to find, and perfect for learning how to evaluate condition, luster, strike quality, and surface preservation. For advanced collectors, high-grade examples and rare varieties present an ongoing challenge and a thrill when a new discovery appears. Another fun detail is that 1976 pennies were among the last widely used copper cents before the mint switched to copper-plated zinc in 1982. That makes them part of a closing chapter in American coin production, and many collectors enjoy building sets that represent the final years of solid copper cents. So why do collectors still love the 1976 D penny today? Because it represents something bigger than its face value. It tells a story of everyday America during a milestone year. It connects modern collectors to a time when coins were still heavy with copper and carried the weight of tradition. And most importantly, it reminds us that even the smallest denomination can hold hidden surprises, whether in condition, errors, or personal meaning. Some collectors remember pulling these pennies from pocket change as kids. Others find them decades later in inherited jars or old coin folders. And every once in a while, someone discovers a high-grade or unusual example that turns an ordinary penny into a memorable find. That possibility, the idea that something valuable could be hiding in plain sight, is what keeps people searching. So the next time you see a penny dated 1976 with a small D beneath the year, don't dismiss it. Turn it over, look closely. You might just be holding a piece of American history, and maybe even a coin that stands out in ways most people never notice. Because sometimes, the most ordinary-looking coins carry the most unexpected stories. And the 1976 D Lincoln penny is proof that even 1 cent can be worth far more than its face value if you know what to look for. And who knows? The next rare coin discovery might not come from a museum, a vault, or an auction house. It might come from your own pocket change. What if the penny sitting in your change jar right now is worth far more than 1 cent, and almost nobody knows it? Today, we're uncovering the hidden story of the 1977 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that looks ordinary, but in rare cases can be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. The 1977 Lincoln cent, without a mint mark, was made in Philadelphia and circulated widely across the United States. Millions of Americans handled these coins every day without ever thinking twice about them. But beneath its familiar copper color and simple design lies a fascinating story of American history, manufacturing mistakes, and the surprising world of coin collecting. This penny was produced during a time when the United States was still recovering from major economic shifts of the 1970s. Inflation was rising, gas shortages were fresh in people's minds, and everyday costs were changing fast. The humble penny, still made mostly of copper at that time, was becoming more expensive to produce, something that would soon reshape American coinage forever. The Lincoln cent design itself dates back to 1909, created to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. It was the first U.S. coin to feature a real person instead of a symbolic figure like Liberty. By 1977, this design had already been in use for nearly 70 years, making it one of the most recognizable coins in American history. On the front, you see Lincoln's profile facing right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, Liberty to the left, and the date to the right. On the back, you see the Lincoln Memorial, with tiny details so fine that you can even spot Lincoln's seated statue inside the building. The 1977 no-mint mark penny specifically means it was made at the Philadelphia Mint, which did not use mint marks on pennies at that time. Coins from Denver carried a D, while San Francisco coins had an S. But Philadelphia coins simply showed the date. In 1977 alone, more than 4 billion Lincoln cents were struck in Philadelphia, making this one of the most heavily produced pennies in U.S. history. That massive number is why most 1977 pennies are only worth face value today. But that's only part of the story. This coin was made primarily of copper, about 95% copper, with the remaining 5% made up of zinc and tin. Just 5 years later, in 1982, the U.S. Mint would switch to mostly zinc pennies with a thin copper coating because copper prices were rising too high. That makes the 1977 penny one of the last generations of real copper cents, which collectors especially appreciate today. But what truly sets some 1977 no-mint mark pennies apart are the rare errors and special conditions that can dramatically increase their value. Most people assume only ancient coins or gold pieces are worth serious money, but error coins, even modern ones, can become extremely desirable. One of the most famous errors found on 1977 pennies is the double die variety. This happens when the coin's design is accidentally stamped twice in slightly different positions, creating a doubling effect on letters or numbers. On some 1977 pennies, collectors have found noticeable doubling on the word liberty, the date, or the phrase "In God We Trust." When genuine and strong, these double dies can transform a 1-cent coin into a 4-figure collectible. Another valuable error is the off-center strike, where the coin design is not properly aligned during striking. Some 1977 cents exist with 10%, 20%, or even more of the design missing, replaced by blank metal. These dramatic mistakes are rare and highly collectible, especially when the date and part of the design remain visible. Then there are clipped planchets, coins that were accidentally cut incorrectly from the metal sheet before being struck. These coins appear to have curved bites missing from their edges and are genuine mint errors, not damage. A 1977 penny with a clean, curved clip and strong detail can be worth far more than its face value. There are also broad strikes, where the coin is struck outside the retaining collar, causing it to spread wider than normal and lack a raised rim. These errors look odd at first glance, but collectors love them because they show how coins are actually made and how things sometimes go wrong inside the minting process. Even without errors, condition matters tremendously. Most 1977 pennies were circulated heavily and show wear, scratches, or dull surfaces, but a small number survived in pristine condition, never entering circulation at all. These are called mint state coins, and they're graded on a scale from 60 to 70, with 70 being nearly perfect. A 1977 no-mint mark penny graded MS-65 or higher can already be worth several dollars, sometimes much more. But when you reach the top levels, such as MS-67 or MS-68 red, values can climb dramatically. These coins retain their original bright copper red color and show almost no visible flaws, even under magnification. In recent auction records, high-grade 1977 Philadelphia pennies have sold for surprising amounts. For example, certified MS-67 red specimens have sold in the $200 to $400 range, depending on eye appeal and demand. Even more impressive, top population examples graded MS-68 red, meaning almost perfect, have sold for over $3,000 at major coin auctions. That's more than 300,000 times their original face value. Error varieties can go even higher. A strong double die 1977 penny in excellent condition can sell for $500 to over $1,500, depending on the clarity of the doubling and the grade. Dramatic off-center strikes with clean surfaces and visible dates have sold for hundreds of dollars, and sometimes more if the error is visually striking. But how can you tell if your 1977 penny is something special or just another common coin? Start by checking the date. It should read 1977 with no mint mark below it. That confirms it came from Philadelphia. Next, examine the color. If the coin still looks bright red or reddish orange instead of dull brown, that's a good sign it may be in higher condition. Most circulated copper pennies turn brown over time, so red examples are harder to find. Then look closely at the lettering and numbers. Use a magnifying glass or phone camera zoom to inspect the word liberty, the date, and "In God We Trust." If you see doubling, where letters look thick, shadowed, or slightly separated, you may have a double die. True doubling looks like a second outline, not just flat or blurry edges. Check the coin's shape and strike. Is the design centered? Is the rim complete and even? If the coin looks unusually wide, has missing edges, or parts of the design cut off, you may be looking at an error coin. Also examine the edges for curved cuts that look smooth and intentional, not jagged or damaged. This could indicate a clipped planchet. To avoid fakes, remember that genuine 1977 pennies should weigh about 3.11 grams, if copper, and they should not be magnetic. Some altered coins or novelty pieces exist, but serious collectors rely on professional grading services like PCGS or NGC to authenticate rare examples. If you believe your coin might be valuable, getting it professionally graded is often the smartest step. Here's something surprising. Even though billions of 1977 pennies were made, fewer than a few dozen examples have reached the very top condition levels known to collectors. That's because copper is soft and scratches easily. Most coins were bagged, shipped, and circulated, picking up tiny marks long before anyone thought to preserve them. So finding a nearly perfect one today is incredibly rare. Another fun fact is that the 1977 penny was one of the last Lincoln cents made entirely before the U.S. Mint began serious testing of alternative metals. Just 5 years later, copper would largely disappear from American pennies. That makes this coin part of the closing chapter of the classic copper cent era. There's also a fascinating design detail most people never notice. On the reverse of the coin inside the Lincoln Memorial, you can see Lincoln's seated statue. And if your eyes are sharp or you use magnification, you can actually make out the outline of his head and shoulders. That tiny detail has amazed collectors for decades and adds to the charm of the design. Collectors love the 1977 no mint mark penny, not because it's old, but because it's familiar. Almost everyone in America has handled one. It's a coin tied to everyday life: grocery stores, school lunchrooms, parking meters, and pocket change. Yet within that familiarity lies the excitement of hidden rarity. The idea that a normal-looking coin could be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars is what draws so many people into the hobby. It's also popular among collectors who enjoy building date sets of Lincoln cents. Because 1977 is common in low grades, but scarce in top condition, it creates a fun challenge. Finding a true gem example requires patience, sharp eyes, and sometimes a bit of luck, especially when searching through old rolls, inherited collections, or forgotten jars of coins. And for error collectors, the 1977 penny is a fascinating playground. Each mistake tells a story about how coins are made, from metal sheets to blank planchets to high-speed presses striking thousands of coins per minute. When something goes wrong in that process, it leaves behind a physical record that collectors treasure. Perhaps the most exciting part is that valuable examples can still be found in everyday places. Unlike ancient coins locked in museums or gold pieces stored in vaults, 1977 pennies still turn up in circulation: old piggy banks, estate sales, and coin jars. That means the next valuable one could be sitting in someone's drawer right now, completely unnoticed. So the next time you see a 1977 penny with no mint mark, don't dismiss it. Examine the color, the strike, the details in the letters. You might just be holding a piece of American history, or even a small fortune disguised as spare change. Because sometimes the most valuable treasures aren't buried underground or locked behind glass. Sometimes they're hiding in plain sight, quietly waiting to be discovered, one penny at a time. Most people walk past this penny every day without realizing it could be hiding something extraordinary in plain sight. But the 1978 no mint mark Lincoln penny has a story that surprises even longtime collectors, and some examples have sold for far more than anyone expects from a 1-cent coin. Let's start with what this coin actually is. The 1978 no mint mark Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin produced by the United States Mint in Philadelphia. When a penny has no mint mark, it means it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally didn't place mint marks on pennies at that time. At first glance, it looks like an ordinary copper penny from the late 1970s. But behind its familiar design lies history, craftsmanship, and in certain cases, real collector value. To understand this coin, we need to go back to the late 1970s in America. In 1978, the country was navigating inflation, rising costs, and changing metal markets. Copper prices were climbing. Mint was under pressure to find cheaper materials for circulating coins. But in 1978, pennies were still made mostly of copper, just before a major change would arrive in 1982, when pennies switched to a copper-plated zinc composition. That makes the 1978 penny part of the final era of true copper cents, a detail collectors care about deeply today. The Lincoln cent itself has a much longer story. First issued in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, it became the first regular U.S. coin to feature a real person. By 1978, the design had already become iconic. On the front is Victor David Brenner's portrait of Lincoln, dignified and steady, facing to the right. On the back is the Lincoln Memorial, introduced in 1959, showing the famous Washington, D.C. monument, with Lincoln's statue visible inside, if you look closely. The 1978 penny fits squarely into this classic design era. It measures 19 millimeters across, weighs about 3.11 grams, and is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin. That solid copper feel is something many people notice immediately when holding one compared to modern pennies, which feel lighter and sound different when dropped on a table. Now let's talk about what makes the 1978 no-mint-mark penny unique. Most were struck in enormous quantities. In fact, the Philadelphia Mint produced over 5.5 billion pennies that year. That means worn examples are extremely common, and most are worth only face value. But in the world of coin collecting, rarity is not just about how many were made. It's about condition, errors, and special characteristics that make certain coins stand out from the rest. One of the biggest reasons collectors seek out the 1978 penny is its potential for minting errors. Errors happen when something goes wrong during the coin production process. These mistakes can include doubled dies, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and die cracks. While most pennies look ordinary, a small number of 1978 cents left the mint with dramatic errors that make them highly desirable. One of the most famous varieties is the 1978 doubled die obverse penny. On this coin you can see noticeable doubling on parts of Lincoln's face and on the date and lettering, especially in Liberty and In God We Trust. This is not damage or wear. It happened when the coin die received a misaligned second impression during the manufacturing process. True double die coins show clear separation between letters and numbers, not just blurry edges. These double die examples are scarce compared to normal strikes, and collectors actively hunt for them in old rolls, jars, and collections. Depending on condition, authentic 1978 double die pennies have sold for hundreds, and in some cases, over $1,000. Another valuable category is off-metal errors. While the vast majority of 1978 pennies were struck on copper planchets, rare mistakes occurred when blanks meant for other coins entered the press. A 1978 penny struck on a dime planchet, for example, would be smaller, lighter, and silver-colored. These are extremely rare, and when authenticated, they can bring thousands of dollars at auction. Then there are off-center strikes, where the design is partially missing because the blank wasn't properly aligned in the press. Minor off-center coins are common and usually worth only a few dollars, but dramatic off-center strikes where the full date is still visible can sell for significant premiums. Condition is another huge factor. Coin collectors use a grading scale that ranges from poor to mint state. Most 1978 pennies in circulation today are worn, scratched, or discolored, but uncirculated examples, especially those with strong original luster and no marks, are far scarcer than people realize. In top condition, even a common date penny can become valuable. In professional grading systems, coins rated MS67 or higher are considered exceptional. These are coins that look nearly perfect under magnification. For the 1978 no-mint-mark penny, coins graded MS67 red by major grading services have sold for hundreds of dollars. In a few exceptional cases, top population examples have sold for over $1,000 at auction. Let's look at some real-world sales. A standard 1978 penny in circulated condition is usually worth 1 cent to maybe 5 cents. An uncirculated example might sell for 25 cents to a few dollars, depending on quality. But a 1978 double die obverse penny in mint state condition has sold at major auctions for $500 to over $1,000. Off-metal errors and dramatic mint mistakes have sold for several $1,000s, depending on rarity and demand. This wide range of value is what makes this coin so exciting. You could have one in your pocket that's worth nothing more than face value, or you could have a rare error or high-grade example worth hundreds or even thousands. And most people never take the time to look closely enough to find out. So how do you identify a real and valuable 1978 no mint mark penny? First, check the date and mint mark. The date should read 1978, and there should be no mint mark under the date. That confirms it was struck in Philadelphia. Next, examine the coin's color and weight. A genuine 1978 penny should be solid copper in color and weigh about 3.11 grams. If it's significantly lighter or silver-colored, it could be an off-metal error, which should be authenticated by a professional. Then look closely at the lettering and Lincoln's portrait. Use a magnifying glass or your phone camera zoomed in. On doubled die coins, you'll see strong doubling, especially on the date, Liberty, and In God We Trust. The doubling will look like two distinct impressions, not just fuzzy or worn edges. Also inspect the rim and shape. If part of the design is missing or shifted off to one side, you may have an off-center strike. If the edge looks irregular or curved inward, it could be a clipped planchet. These features should look natural, not filed or altered, and the metal flow should appear smooth and consistent. Be cautious about fakes or altered coins. Some people try to create fake errors by carving letters, grinding edges, or chemically altering surfaces. Real mint errors usually show smooth metal flow and natural-looking features, not rough or sharp tool marks. When in doubt, professional grading services can authenticate and encapsulate your coin, confirming whether it's genuine and assigning it an official grade. Now let's talk about some fun and surprising facts about the 1978 penny. One interesting detail is that 1978 was one of the last full years when pennies were made of nearly pure copper. Just 4 years later, in 1982, the mint switched to zinc cores with thin copper plating. That makes pre-1982 pennies heavier, more durable, and more appealing to collectors who enjoy classic coin compositions. Another fun fact is that because billions of pennies were struck in 1978, this coin is still incredibly easy to find today. Unlike rare dates that disappeared from circulation decades ago, you can still pull a 1978 penny from loose change, coin jars, or bankrolls. That accessibility makes it perfect for beginner collectors and treasure hunters alike. The Lincoln Memorial design on the back also holds a hidden detail many people never notice. Inside the columns of the memorial, you can actually see Lincoln's seated statue. It's one of the smallest and most detailed elements ever engraved on a circulating U.S. coin. On high-grade 1978 pennies, that tiny statue can be seen clearly, adding another layer of appeal for collectors who appreciate sharp strikes and fine detail. Another surprising detail is that some 1978 pennies show weak strikes, where parts of the design appear softer or less defined. These are not always errors, but they can indicate worn dies or production issues, and in certain cases, collectors seek out these varieties as well. So why do collectors love the 1978 no mint mark penny today? First, it represents the final chapter of the classic copper cent era. For many collectors, these coins feel more substantial and traditional than modern zinc cents. Second, the possibility of valuable errors keeps people searching. The thrill of finding a double die or off-metal strike in ordinary pocket change is something few hobbies can match. Third, high-grade examples are surprisingly rare, making them valuable to collectors building top-quality Lincoln cent sets. There's also a nostalgic factor. Many people alive today remember the late 1970s vividly. Finding a penny from that year can spark memories of childhood, school days, and simpler times, adding emotional value beyond the coin's monetary worth. And perhaps most importantly, this coin reminds us that history doesn't always live in museums or vaults. Sometimes it sits quietly in a drawer, a jar, or a wallet, waiting to be noticed. So the next time you come across a 1978 penny with no mint mark, don't dismiss it. Check the date, the lettering, the surface, and the strike. That ordinary-looking cent might be a rare variety, a high-grade survivor, or even a valuable mint error. And even if it's not, You're still holding a small piece of American history from a time when pennies were still made of real copper and carried a weight that you can literally feel in your hand. Because in the world of coin collecting, it's not always the oldest coin or the rarest date that tells the most interesting story. Sometimes it's the coin everyone overlooks that ends up being the most surprising of all. And who knows, the next 1978 penny you find might not just be worth 1 cent. If you have a jar of old pennies at home, this single coin could be hiding in plain sight. A 1979 Lincoln penny with no mint mark that might be worth far more than 1 cent, and in rare cases, hundreds or even thousands of dollars. This is the story of the 1979 no mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that looks ordinary, feels ordinary, and was once treated like spare change. But behind its simple copper surface is a fascinating chapter in American history, a year of transition at the U.S. Mint, and a handful of rare varieties that collectors search for every single day. The 1979 Lincoln penny is part of the Lincoln Memorial Cent series, which began in 1959 to honor the 150th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. For decades, Americans had seen Lincoln's profile on the front of the penny, but in 1959, the reverse design was changed to show the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. By 1979, that design had already been in circulation for 20 years, and the penny had become one of the most familiar coins in the country. The coin we're focusing on today has no mint mark, which means it was made at the Philadelphia Mint. At that time, Philadelphia typically did not place a mint mark on circulating coins, so a blank space beneath the date tells us exactly where it came from. In 1979, Philadelphia produced over 7.4 billion pennies, more than 7 billion coins in a single year, making this one of the most heavily minted cents in U.S. history. So why would anyone care about a penny that was made by the billions? The answer lies in the details: the metal, the strike quality, rare errors, and a few surprising varieties that turn ordinary coins into serious collectibles. To understand this coin, you have to go back to the late 1970s. America was facing rising copper prices, inflation, and changing manufacturing costs. The penny was becoming more expensive to produce, and the U.S. Mint was already considering alternatives to solid copper coins. But in 1979, the Lincoln cent was still made primarily of copper, about 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin, just like pennies had been for decades. Above Lincoln's head is the word liberty, and behind him is the phrase, "In God we trust." Beneath his portrait is the date, 1979, and on Philadelphia coins, no mint mark appears next to it. On the reverse, you'll see the Lincoln Memorial, with its tall columns and sharp architectural lines. If you look closely at high-quality strikes, you can actually see a tiny seated statue of Lincoln between the columns, a hidden detail many people never notice until someone points it out. Most 1979 no mint mark pennies are worth exactly 1 cent. But collectors aren't looking for average coins. They're looking for condition, rarity, and errors, and that's where things get interesting. In everyday circulation, pennies get scratched, bent, worn smooth, and stained. But a 1979 penny that somehow survived untouched, straight from a bankroll or mint set, can be worth much more than face value. In uncirculated condition, especially those graded MS-65 or higher by professional grading services, these coins regularly sell for several dollars. At MS-67 and above, prices can rise dramatically, sometimes into the hundreds. But condition alone isn't the most exciting part of this story. The real value comes from rare varieties and minting errors, coins that slipped through quality control and left the mint with unusual characteristics. These errors weren't intentional, but they became treasures once collectors discovered them. One of the most famous varieties of the 1979 Lincoln cent is the 1979 wide AM reverse. On most pennies from this era, the letters A and M in America on the reverse are close together, nearly touching. But on some 1979 pennies, the spacing is wider than normal. This wide AM variety was originally meant for proof coins, not circulation coins, but a small number ended up on business strike pennies from Philadelphia. These wide AM coins look almost identical to regular pennies unless you know exactly what to look for. But once spotted, they can be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars depending on condition. Another valuable category includes doubled die errors. These occur when the coin die receives multiple impressions at slightly different angles during manufacturing, causing parts of the design to appear doubled. On some 1979 pennies, you might see doubling in the date, the word liberty, or the phrase, "In God we trust." These aren't machine doubling, which is flat and worthless, but true doubled dies with rounded raised duplication that collectors prize. Then there are off-center strikes, clipped planchets, broad strikes, and wrong planchet errors. Coins struck partially off the metal blank, missing sections, or struck on blanks meant for other denominations. Each of these errors creates a one-of-a-kind coin, and some 1979 pennies with dramatic errors have sold for hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Now let's talk about real money. A standard 1979 no-mint mark penny in circulated condition is usually worth 1 cent. In nice uncirculated condition, it may bring anywhere from 25 cents to several dollars. But at the highest levels, professionally graded MS-67 or higher, auction prices have climbed into the hundreds. Wide AM varieties have sold for anywhere from $200 to over $2,000, depending on grade and eye appeal. Some rare double die examples have crossed the $500 mark, while dramatic mint errors, especially those that are visually striking, have sold for well over $1,000. What makes this exciting is that these coins were made for everyday use. They were tossed into pockets, dropped in vending machines, left in tip jars, and stored in coffee cans for decades. That means valuable examples could still be sitting unnoticed in homes across America right now. So how can you tell if your 1979 penny is something special? Start with the date and mint mark. If it says 1979 and there's no letter beneath the date, you have a Philadelphia coin, the correct starting point. Next, check the weight. A genuine 1979 copper penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. If it's significantly lighter, it may be damaged, altered, or something unusual. Though true wrong metal errors are extremely rare and should be professionally examined. Look closely at the word America. If the A and M appear noticeably separated, not nearly touching, you may have the wide AM variety, one of the most valuable types of this coin. Then, inspect the front lettering and date with a magnifying glass. Look for clear doubling that appears rounded and raised, not flat or smeared. True doubled dies look like the coin was struck twice in slightly different positions, because in a way, it was. Also watch for off-center designs, missing edges, cracked surfaces, or unusual shapes. Any dramatic error is worth setting aside for expert evaluation. As for counterfeits, most fake pennies aren't sophisticated, because the base coin is usually only worth 1 cent. But altered coins do exist. Some people try to modify spacing in letters, polish surfaces, or fake mint errors. That's why professional grading services like PCGS or NGC are essential for high-value coins. They authenticate, grade, and encapsulate the coin, giving buyers confidence and protecting sellers from disputes. One of the most surprising facts about the 1979 penny is just how close it came to being the last copper cent. Within just a few years, rising copper prices forced the mint to abandon solid copper coins. That makes 1979 one of the final full years of the traditional copper composition. And that historical turning point adds to its appeal. Another fun detail is that 1979 was the year Susan B. Anthony dollars were introduced, the first circulating U.S. coin to feature a real woman other than Liberty. It was a year of experimentation and change at the mint, and the penny quietly reflects that transition behind the scenes. Collectors also love this coin because it's accessible. You don't need thousands of dollars to start searching for one. You can find them in pocket change, old jars, coin albums, or inherited collections. It's one of those coins that makes everyday people feel like treasure hunters, because you don't need to buy rare coins to find rare coins. Sometimes they're already sitting in your home. Another surprising detail is how many people overlook the reverse of their coins. Most casual collectors focus on the date and mint mark, but with the 1979 penny, the reverse spacing in America can be the most important detail of all. Entire collections have been searched and researched because someone learned about the wide AM variety years later and realized they had never checked for it. There's also something powerful about holding a copper penny from 1979. This coin passed through countless hands during a time of major cultural change, gas shortages, rising inflation, technological shifts, and the dawn of the digital age. It bought newspapers, candy bars, bus rides, and cups of coffee. It traveled across states, through cash registers, piggy banks, and drawers, quietly surviving long after many of the things it purchased were forgotten. That sense of hidden history is one reason collectors are drawn to coins like this. They aren't just metal, they're physical pieces of American life. Today, collectors love the 1979 no-mint mark penny because it combines availability with opportunity. Most examples are common, but the rare ones, the wide AM varieties, the doubled dies, the pristine high-grade coins, are scarce enough to spark serious competition, and that combination keeps demand strong year after year. It's also a favorite among beginner collectors because it teaches important lessons. It shows how condition affects value. It demonstrates how tiny design details matter, and it proves that valuable coins don't always look valuable at first glance. For seasoned collectors, the 1979 penny is a reminder that modern coins still hold secrets. Even in the age of advanced minting technology, mistakes happen, and those mistakes become tomorrow's collectibles. For casual collectors, it offers hope, the kind of hope that comes from knowing that something small and ordinary might actually be extraordinary. So if you have a handful of pennies nearby, take a moment to look through them. Check the dates. Look for 1979. Flip it over. Examine the letters in America. Tilt it under the light. You may be holding a coin worth far more than 1 cent. Or you may simply be holding a piece of history that survived when millions of others did not. Either way, the 1979 no-mint mark Lincoln penny proves something important. Not all treasures sparkle. Some are quiet, some are small, and some are hiding in places we've stopped paying attention to, like the bottom of a drawer, the corner of a jar, or the change in your pocket. And that's what makes this coin so powerful. Because the next time someone hands you a penny, you might not see spare change anymore. You might see possibility. Most people would walk past this penny without a second thought. But what if I told you that a single 1998 Lincoln penny, the kind that looks completely ordinary, could be hiding a value far beyond 1 cent? And in rare cases, some versions have sold for hundreds, even thousands of dollars. Today, we're uncovering the real story behind the 1998 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, and why you might want to check your change jar tonight. The 1998 no-mint mark Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin struck by the United States Mint in Philadelphia. When a penny has no mint mark beneath the date, it usually means it was made in Philadelphia, which traditionally didn't use mint marks on cents until recent decades. At first glance, this coin looks exactly like millions of others from the late 1990s, but collectors know that certain dates, conditions, and rare errors can turn everyday coins into hidden treasures, and 1998 is one of those years worth paying attention to. To understand why, let's go back to 1998. America was in the middle of a booming economy. The internet was growing fast, payphones were disappearing, and people were still using cash every day for everything from groceries to coffee. The U.S. Mint was producing billions of coins annually to keep up with circulation demand, and pennies were among the most heavily minted coins in the country. In 1998 alone, the Philadelphia Mint struck over 5 billion Lincoln cents. That massive production number is one reason most 1998 pennies are still only worth face value today. But history has taught collectors something important. When mints strike coins in huge numbers, mistakes happen. And sometimes, those mistakes slip through unnoticed, becoming rare collectibles decades later. By 1998, the Lincoln cent had already been around for nearly 90 years. First introduced in 1909 to honor President Abraham Lincoln's 100th birthday, it was the first circulating U.S. coin to feature a real person. The familiar portrait by Victor David Brenner had become one of the most recognizable designs in American history. And in 1998, that same classic design was still in use. But beneath that familiar look, the coin itself had changed. Since 1982, most Lincoln cents were made of zinc, with a thin copper coating. That means the 1998 penny isn't solid copper like older cents. Instead, it's about 97.5% zinc and just 2.5% copper on the outside. This made the coin cheaper to produce, but it also introduced new possibilities for errors, especially during plating and striking. On the front of the coin, you'll see Abraham Lincoln facing right, with the word Liberty to the left of his profile, and the date 1998 to the right. Just beneath the date is where a mint mark would appear, but on Philadelphia coins, that space is blank. On the back, the design features the Lincoln Memorial, which had been used since 1959. If you look closely at the steps of the memorial, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside, one of the smallest detailed figures ever placed on a U.S. coin. Most 1998 pennies look completely normal, but collectors are interested in more than just normal. Some 1998 no mint mark pennies were struck with unusual errors, and these are where things get exciting. One of the most valuable error types is the wide AM variety. On most Lincoln Memorial cents from the late 1990s, the letters A and M in the word America on the reverse are almost touching, but in rare cases, the spacing between those letters is noticeably wider. This happened when proof-style dies meant for special collector coins were accidentally used to strike regular circulation pennies. In 1998, a small number of these wide AM pennies entered circulation. Most people spent them without noticing, but collectors later realized these coins were not supposed to exist, and suddenly an ordinary penny became a rare variety. Another valuable error seen on some 1998 cents includes off-center strikes, where the design is not properly aligned, leaving part of the coin blank. There are also double die errors where certain letters or numbers appear doubled due to a misaligned die during production. These mistakes are subtle, but once you see one, you can't unsee it. There are also planchet errors, where the zinc core or copper plating was improperly applied, leading to bubbles, peeling surfaces, or missing sections of copper coating. While not all of these are valuable, dramatic examples can command serious collector interest. So why would a penny from such a common year become valuable? It comes down to three things: condition, rarity, and demand. First, condition matters more than almost anything else. Most 1998 pennies have been circulated for decades, picking up scratches, discoloration, and wear. But coins that survived in near-perfect condition, especially those graded by professional services, are surprisingly scarce. A flawless coin from a common year can be rarer than a damaged coin from a rare year. Second, error coins and varieties dramatically reduce supply. A wide AM penny or dramatic mint error might only exist in a few hundred examples, or even fewer, and once collectors identify them, demand increases fast. Third, the Lincoln cent is one of the most widely collected coins in America. Millions of people collect them by date, by error, by variety, or simply out of nostalgia. That huge collector base means even modest rarities can bring strong prices. Now let's talk about real-world values. A normal circulated 1998 no mint arc penny is usually worth just 1 cent. Even uncirculated examples pulled from rolls typically sell for only a few cents to $1. But when you move into high-grade certified coins, values change quickly. A 1998 penny graded MS67 read by a professional grading service has sold for over $100. In even higher grades, prices can climb higher simply because so few coins survive in flawless condition, but the real attention grabbers are the wide AM varieties. A verified 1998 wide AM penny in strong uncirculated condition has sold at auction for several $100s. Some exceptional examples have crossed the $1,000 mark, depending on eye appeal, color, and certification. These are coins that once sat unnoticed in loose change, now commanding serious money from collectors. Major error coins, such as dramatic off-center strikes or strong double dies, have also sold for hundreds of dollars, especially when the date and design remain clearly visible. The key point is this: most 1998 pennies are common, but a tiny fraction are not, and those rare ones are often found by everyday people who simply took the time to look closely. So how can you tell if your 1998 no mint mark penny might be special? Look closely at the word America. If the A and M are nearly touching, that's the standard version. But if there's a clear gap between them, You may have the wide AM variety, and that's worth further investigation. Next, inspect the date and lettering on the front. If the numbers or letters look doubled, especially on 1998, Liberty, or In God We Trust, you could be looking at a double die error. Then examine the overall strike. If the design is shifted, missing details, or partially off the edge, that could indicate an off-center strike. Also check for odd textures, peeling copper, or bubbles on the surface, signs of plating errors. Weight can help too. A normal 1998 penny weighs about 2.5 grams. A significantly lighter or heavier coin could indicate a wrong planchet or other mint error. If you believe you found something unusual, don't clean the coin. Cleaning can permanently damage its surface and destroy collector value. Instead, store it safely and consider having it evaluated by a professional coin dealer or third-party grading service. Now, let's talk about fakes, because whenever coins gain value, counterfeits appear. Fortunately, fake 1998 pennies are uncommon, but altered coins do exist. Some people attempt to modify ordinary pennies to mimic rare varieties, especially wide AM coins or double dies. One trick involves manually reshaping letters or adding artificial doubling with tools. To spot fakes, look for unnatural tool marks, rough surfaces, or inconsistent spacing between letters. Genuine wide AM coins have clean, natural spacing that matches known examples. If something looks off or forced, it probably is. Professional grading services use microscopes, weight testing, and die matching to confirm authenticity, so certification is always recommended for valuable finds. Now here's something surprising. Many collectors believe the most valuable coins are always the oldest, but that's not always true. Some modern coins from the 1990s and 2000s are now worth more than many coins from the 1800s, simply because rare errors from modern mints are harder to find in circulation, and because collectors often assume newer coins can't be valuable. Another fun fact, the Lincoln Memorial reverse design on the 1998 penny was retired just a year later, in 2009, when the mint introduced new reverse designs to commemorate Lincoln's bicentennial. That makes 1998 one of the final years of the classic memorial style, adding nostalgia value for many collectors. And here's something even more fascinating. The tiny statue of Lincoln inside the memorial on the reverse is so detailed that with magnification, you can actually make out his seated position. It's one of the smallest portraits ever placed on U.S. currency. Collectors also love this coin because it represents the hidden treasure aspect of coin collecting. It's not about owning gold bars or ancient relics. It's about finding something extraordinary in something ordinary. A penny from a pocket, a drawer, or a coffee shop register might turn out to be worth far more than anyone expected. That sense of discovery keeps people searching through rolls of coins decades after they were minted. And the 1998 no mint mark penny has become one of those dates that collectors always pause on, just in case. There's also emotional value. For many Americans, pennies from the 1990s remind them of childhood. Piggy banks, school fundraisers, vending machines, and spare change jars on kitchen counters. Finding out that one of those everyday coins might be rare creates a powerful connection between memory and possibility. It turns loose change into a treasure hunt. And unlike many collectibles, coin collecting doesn't require expensive equipment or special access. Anyone can participate. All you need is curiosity, patience, and a few spare minutes to look closely at what you already own. So what's the real takeaway from the 1998 no mint mark Lincoln penny? It's not that everyone is valuable. Most are not. It's that some are, and those valuable ones often go unnoticed because people assume modern coins can't be special. Rare varieties, mint errors, and top condition survivors from common years routinely surprise collectors and sellers alike. That means the next valuable coin might already be sitting in your home, in a drawer, in a jar, in your pocket right now. The 1998 penny reminds us that hidden value doesn't always come from age, gold, or rarity at first glance. Sometimes it comes from tiny details, overlooked features, and quiet mistakes made decades ago. Mistakes that turned ordinary objects into extraordinary finds. So the next time you see a penny dated 1998 with no mint mark, don't dismiss it. Turn it over. Look closely at the letters. Check the spacing. Examine the surface, because in a world where billions of coins were made, only a few carry the secrets collectors are searching for, and you never know. The smallest coin in your hand might just be holding the biggest surprise. Thanks for watching, and keep checking your change. The next story worth telling might already be in your pocket.